Welcome to Grumpy Vegan Grandad, Dan here. If you're new to the channel, please hit subscribe and tap the notifications bell for more great content. So last night on BBC One in the UK, a TV documentary called Panorama showed the realities of dairy farming and talked about dairy and milk production, and more importantly, footage from an undercover worker who worked at a particular farm in Wales. So I'm going to show a few clips of the BBC TV show. I'm hoping it's probably going to demonetize me, but who cares? I'm hoping it doesn't get taken down. So once you've seen this, please share it out just in case it does get barred or prohibited. So I'm going to show a few clips. Later on, at the end, I have a chat with Roger Yates about this, because is it all good? Is it all good? We don't know, because it's about cruelty. It was all about cruelty, and do we want to end the cruelty but carry on dairy farming? These are the questions we've got to ask.
Milk's as popular as ever, but should we think more about how it's produced? Red Tractor says its scheme is the bedrock of progressive farming in Britain, and animal welfare is core to all that we do. Contacted Red Tractor and two government inspectorates, the Food Standards Agency and the Animal and Plant Health Agency. After we got in touch, all three carried out unannounced inspections at the farm. Red Tractor would only say that the farm is currently a member of its assurance scheme. We understand that neither of the government agencies identified any animal welfare concerns. As consumers, we've all got used to cheap milk. Over the past 10 years, the price has barely gone up at all.
Okay, this next footage has come from the website. This is the footage that was used in the documentary. There is some distressing footage for the next 7 minutes, so please look away for the next 7 minutes. I will notify you when it ends.
Animal Equality has gone undercover inside this Welsh dairy farm and documented lame cows being violently abused, tormented, and left to die in agonizing pain for days without medical care. We're now urging the Welsh authorities to prosecute Maddox Farm and the individuals who committed the distressing crimes you're about to witness. Maddox Farm, located in southern Wales, provides milk to Freshways, a major processor of dairy products and supplier to British Airways, Costa, Londis and other major retailers across the UK. At the farm, a slurry of waste flows across the concrete floor. The cold metal of the milking carousel is caked in it, as are their hooves that never dry. She'll spend her entire life walking back and forth from these dark and dirty stalls until her body finally collapses or can't produce enough anymore. 25% of cows in the UK's dairy industry suffer from lameness.
We've got a lot of lame cows here for some reason again.
Referred to by her number, 576 is limping on her way to be milked.
Come on, you look.
Because she is slow to exit the stall, an enraged worker punches her in the face repeatedly to hurry her out. Number 209 can no longer hold her own weight and collapses in the milking stall. To get her to stand, she is forcefully kicked in the stomach and back by multiple workers. The trapped cow is eventually dragged out by her tail while her legs are kicked underneath her. Throughout our investigation, violence towards sick and lame cows was prevalent. Cows are routinely kicked and hit in the face to get them to move. Their tails are regularly twisted, an act which inflicts significant pain. Number 440204 has just given birth and collapses in a doorway. In response, one worker forcefully twists her tail, while another kicks her in the udders. Forcing her to stand. But she collapses again. In one incident, a sick cow is tormented as she is restrained. The acting manager is seen laughing as she strikes her with a feeding tube while attempting to insert it into her mouth and down her throat. Agitated and clearly distressed, she suffers internal injuries and bleeds profusely. She is not checked or treated for this injury. During our investigation on Maddox Farm, we discovered widespread lameness and gross unlawful treatment and handling of lame and sick animals.
Who's gonna get the gun now? Oh. Shooter, now. You come in? And we all have cow for dinner. We all have cow for dinner then?
Animal Equality's investigation of Maddox Farm exposed serious repeated violations of the Animal Welfare Act. Cows and calves were routinely hit, caused serious distress, and made to experience unjustifiable and entirely preventable prolonged suffering. Our investigation also uncovered an apparent working policy on the farm to avoid paying available veterinarians to promptly euthanize dying animals. Instead, workers are instructed to wait for a deadstock removal firm. This farm deliberately leaves cows to suffer and slowly die, a fact the acting manager acknowledges.
Probably the suffering, yeah. Probably is. I told Brad, if there's a guy coming to do it today or tomorrow. Thing is, the vet charges a lot of money.
Suffering that is both unnecessary and knowingly preventable.
Maybe not today.
Should be dead tomorrow.
Maybe.
Yeah. And the price is a lot more. How much is it to kill a cow?
Yeah. Try it multiple places, and this is one place where you'd rather just save the money and yeah.
Dead. One that was yesterday, the vet looked at. Yeah.
Maddox Farm's approach to euthanizing animals by prolonging their suffering for days likely means that other animals will experience the same agonizing end. Join us in demanding that Maddox Farm be held accountable for its crimes. You can also help by leaving dairy and other...
Okay, end of footage here. So, yeah, I've decided to contact Roger Yates, who should be there, or there, whichever side it's on. And yeah, I thought I'd contact Roger about this because I'm still a bit sort of, I don't know where I stand with welfareism. I do know where I stand with it. It shouldn't be welfareism, but this has gone into millions of people's homes on BBC, so it's been forced into people. So there is some good connotations coming from it that people can see that when vegans talk about the treatment of animals on dairy farms, it is actual truth. We are talking the truth. So, Roger, you didn't actually see the BBC documentary itself, but I linked, what was the group called?
Equality.
Animal Equality. I linked the video, which you can all find on, I'll link it down below. You can all find, and it does show the actual undercover footage used in the BBC documentary. So I thought I'd contact Roger and ask him his thoughts on that. We're going to talk a little bit about something that happened later on in the BBC show that Roger didn't see, but I've explained it. I've explained it to him, so we will talk about that. So, what are your thoughts on this BBC show going out? Isn't it a good thing that people see how badly these animals are treated, because they cut in corners, the margins on milk are so low that they can't afford to get treat them decently? I mean, what's your view on the whole thing, Roger?
Yeah, there's a couple of kind of positions we have to understand. First of all, social movements are claims makers, so we make claims. So we've got the footage, and then it's a question of what claims are we going to make about the footage, and then those claims are within the culture of speciesism, which we learn as kids. It's socialized into us. We internalize it quite often. And also animal welfare is kind of part of that socialization. So it's kind of, well, we can use other animals, but we shouldn't be cruel. Okay. Now, the animal rights case kind of cuts through all that and says whether it's cruel or not, it's a rights violation. And that's not what we're getting from the claims making about this. And so from a welfare rights situation, which I know is controversial for many people, making that separation, but from that distinction, it's a problem, because people are going to say, because they're socialized as speciesists, they're going to claim, well, okay, I'm against animal abuse, who isn't? I'm against animal cruelty, who isn't? So what's needed here is to take the cruelty out of the use. That's always the danger, whereas the animal rights position is saying the cruelty just makes the use worse, but the fundamental wrong is the use, which tends to be the position that we're not good at getting over, because that's a more kind of rights-based position, like a Tom Reagan type position, which would say that if we use them, it's a rights violation. We don't say that in our movement. We say, don't be cruel, have mercy, be an animal lover, that kind of stuff. So we talk welfare, and so it's not surprising that the people who see that will respond with welfare in their mind. And they'll go, okay, well, we just need to take the cruelty out of it. So that's the fundamental issue that we're dealing with here. You have to be very careful when you're putting these kind of campaigns together to make sure that if you're not a welfarist, you've got to make sure that people understand, and journalists understand, that you're not a welfarist, because they're so used to people talking about abusers, cruelty, having mercy, don't be cruel, all that kind of weak claims making, whereas the animal rights claims making is much stronger. It's other animals have rights, and we don't have the right to violate their rights. So it's much stronger. It's just that we're not as good at putting that over as we are of,
right?
Because we're in an animal welfare movement that calls itself an animal rights movement, Danny. That's what I'm saying. And so it's people are more comfortable talking about cruelty than they are about talking about rights. Which is fair enough. It's just that it makes it difficult for rightists to get their point over then.
So let me try and put this in layman terms, right? I mean, it's taken me, since we first talked quite a few years ago, it's taken me a long time to get my head around it and a pattern of thinking. So let me just break it down into layman's terms. So what you're saying is the actual fact that we are using animals as a product is what the problem is. The abuse and torture is just something that is part of using animals in that way in the first place. And that's not what we're after getting rid of. So, for instance, the best example of that would be free-range eggs. So people said, yeah, this abject cruelty that we're putting these hens in small cages in really bad conditions. So they said, okay, well, what we'll do, we'll free the chickens, we'll let them roam about, and that's better. We've cut out the cruelty now. There you go. That's what you wanted. So that's what you're actually saying to me now is that it's not the actual
Yeah.
cruelty that's the problem. It's the fact
it's kind of like that in the sense. I mean, when I came to the movement in 1979, the battery cage campaign was already being run, and it's been run by Compassionate World Farming. And Compassionate World Farming was a group that was set up in 1967 by a dairy farmer, Peter Roberts. And so it was never an abolitionist group. They just wanted to go back to extensive farming, and they were opposed to intensive farming. And so the way that the culture dealt with that is by producing either free range farming and redefining what free range meant, or they came up with something which they called an enriched battery cage, which was, you know, still a cage, but with little bits of toys in it there, or a little sheet of plastic and all that kind of stuff. So this is the problem. If you don't make clear that the fundamental problem from your point of view is animal use, then you're going to get welfare. And so if you join in with the welfare paradigm in terms of how you talk about the issue, that's where it'll stay.
Right.
That's all I'm saying. If you don't present position of animal rights, it will always be animal welfare, because everybody knows animal welfare and everybody agrees with it. You don't go anywhere. You do street work, Danny, and you don't get people going, I'm in favor of animal cruelty. It's just that they don't know what to do with the fact that, well, look, you're showing some footage. Their reaction is, well, that's cruel. It shouldn't be like that. But they don't, in their mind, critique the fact that that's animal use. We shouldn't be using them. We shouldn't be using them in a cruel way. And if our claims making is the same, they're never going to think differently, are they?
Exactly. But I mean, there is a flip side to it, and it does work on that side of things as well. I mean, street conversations with people, they see the cruelty and they do stop. A lot of people do go vegan. I mean, it's increased massively. They reckon like 200 to 300% over the last 5 years in the increase of veganism in the UK. So something's going right, Roger. So maybe the cruelty side of it is the trigger for people to change the habits and the purchases and the way they live the life. And maybe the philosophical side of it, the animal rights side of it will sort of eventually creep in, which it has with me. But this show now is surely going to turn a lot of people off milk, off dairy. It's got to. Now, isn't that a positive? Are you actually saying that is
that's what I said? But that's why I said that the crucial thing now is, once we've got this footage, once we've got that kind of program, is the claims making needs to be right. And for me, that's about rights. Yeah. You know, whereas, I mean, if people, you know, if people are on the street now doing the We Are Free or the Cubes or Earthlings, they're on there and people go, oh, I saw that Panorama thing. Isn't it terrible? And if the activists say, yeah, there's a petition about that, the petition is terrible. It's all about welfare. It's all about.
Right, well, let's hold there on the petition, because we're going to whip through. Have you got access to that petition that you can read while you're on this?
Yeah, it's on my screen right here.
So we'll talk about that.
It will be if I can turn my computer on.
Now, I tend to agree with you, because on that show, and I've explained to Roger what this guy said and what this guy was about. And basically, on the show, if you haven't watched it, there's an ethical dairy farmer.
The ethical dairy has a herd of 120 cows, owned by farmer David Finley.
We wanted to see, is it possible to create a more natural environment for our animals so that they are relaxed, they're stress-free, and they're productive and healthy.
Because you can see over here that the mothers are with the calves, and that's unusual, isn't it?
To say the least. I think the industry predicted that we wouldn't be able to make it work, both in terms of financial and in terms of practical application.
David Finley says that despite much of his cow's milk going to feed their calves, he makes it work financially. The milk he does take from the cows, he turns into profitable artisan cheese and ice cream, instead of selling it on as liquid milk. He also says keeping the calves with their mothers means they grow faster, so he can sell them sooner and keep his costs down.
And he's been shunned by his peers. Everybody, nobody will talk to him. And funnily enough, he said most of them are related to me. It's like, whoa. But basically what he's doing is he's leaving the calves with the mothers for 6 months. He only milks them once a day. But his last statement on the BBC show was, look how quickly they grow. They grow way faster. And then in 6 months, I can sell them for a good price. Now, people will see ethical dairy. Now, he doesn't make money on the liquid milk either. He makes artisan cheeses and all that, because obviously he can't sell it. The margins are too low. But he's actually no better. But because people see ethical dairy farmer and see that, the offspring stay with the mothers, again, I agree with you, Roger. That's going to make people sleep at night and think, oh, okay, I'm going to carry on using dairy now. I'm going to get it from an ethical farm, an ethical dairy farm. So we're back to square one. And
yeah. Well, I want to say something about that, because I know that issue was coming up, and I was at an Earthlink experience in Dublin. Must be a couple of years ago now, and there was 3 female dairy farmers who came up to us, and they were talking to us. And I said to them, because one of them was saying what really upsets her is all the lowing that goes on, the calling, once you're separated, the calling. And I said, well, look, in your opinion, is it better to remove them early, or is it better to remove them late? And she said that they remove them sometimes at 5 months, and sometimes straight away. She says it's actually worse for the cow and the offspring to be removed when they're older.
yeah,
That's because they bonded more.
yes.
So it's actually more traumatic for that. So that ethical dairy farmer is possibly causing more cow trauma and calf
that's
trauma.
exactly the thought that went through my head when I looked at it. I thought, well, hold on a minute, put it in human context. If your baby gets taken away from you at birth, you don't have time to bond. All right, there's an instant bond because the baby's been growing inside the mother for 9 months. But can you imagine waiting until that child is like 3-4 years old and then taking the child away? The trauma is unbelievable. So yeah, I get it, mate. I get it.
Yeah, I mean, you see, the point is, we're in a situation where people are calling animal use, some versions of it, ethical, and we're back to the free range problem again. We're not cutting through it and going, hang on a second. The animal rights position is saying that all use is a rights violation. It cuts through all these kind of, see, people used to come up to our stall in Dublin, VIP, and they would kind of almost like go, okay, well, I'm against animal cruelty, so tell me which meat can I buy? Which cheese can I, all that kind of stuff. And we would say, well, from our position, we talk about none of it. Whereas what they're expecting is that there must be a humane version somewhere, and they want to know where it is because that's what they want to do, which is why I always go to my free range farm and all this kind of stuff. I make sure I buy free range. They don't know what free range means particularly. It's just that it's comforting for them to think that they're, it's kind of fair trade, Yeah,
they sleep at night. So, okay, before we go on to the petition, so just give me a quick sort of pros and cons of that BBC show last night, what you think the pros and cons are, because it can't be all bad, Roger. There's got to be some sort of positivity towards the move out of it. So give us a quick sort of recap on what you think.
Well, first of all, obviously, in terms of claims making, you say this is an example of animal use. We could go down to the farm next door, and the chances are we're gonna find the same type of thing. The farmers are going to say, on the other hand, no, we are high welfare, all this kind of stuff. As we know from investigations, high welfare means virtually nothing in terms of from the other animals' point of view. So it's very important that our claims making is not feeding into this idea that are we talking about one bad apple here? And in fact, the petition is asking for prosecutions. I wouldn't be interested in prosecutions because it's not a one bad apple situation. You want to end the industry rather than prosecute the cruel people.
Yeah.
Because from a welfare people, I mean, from our point of view, it's all wrong. Okay, so it's not a question of like, who's cruel, let's take them out of the equation. That's actually what the welfarists would want, and that's what the public would want. They would say, yes, let's get these cruel people out of that Welsh farm and replace them with somebody who's going to treat them humanely. And then from the culture point of view, from the public point of view, the problem's over. From our point of view, the farm continues. So, you know, there's a disconnect. We've got to be careful here. It's all to do with claims making. So it's good that people have seen the animal use. They need to understand that this is the fact that other animals are items of property. And from our point of view, they're rights bearers, and that their rights are being violated, and would be even in the humane, high welfare, ethical farms. They're all the same. Fundamentally, from an animal rights position, they're all the same. They're all animal rights violators. They're all the same. What we're doing here is kind of in danger of saying, we found a particularly horrible, cruel place, or we've found a series of cruel places. We want these people prosecuted. We want them regulated. We want them licensed. No, we want them out of the way. We want them abolished.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's not the fact. The petition calls for the end of the petition is, we want you to regulate animal welfare better.
Right, let's go through this petition.
Okay, I'll need my eyes for that. Go on.
Yeah, get your eyes on. Didn't eat enough carrots when you were younger. That's your problem.
That's true. That's probably true. So they're basically saying that they've been into lots of animal use facilities and they've found cruelty. Well, yeah, that's part and parcel of what goes on. The fundamental is that they find animal rights violations. What they're asking for then is for the implementation of licensing systems for farms. Breaches of license will result in non-renewal. Inspections required for license renewal. These inspections must be robust and occasionally unannounced. Now, I've worked in, I was a professional projectionist for over a decade. And we always knew when the fire chief was coming round, and all that kind of stuff. When you're going to be inspected. Somebody's going to ring you up and say, oh, by the way, there's somebody on the prowl, kind of thing. And then everything gets cleaned up. The inspection goes on, and then you go back to what normally happens. It's a little bit like there's a bit of sociology here. You know what it's like. You've worked in industry and stuff, Danny. There's a kind of rule book thing of what you're supposed to do, and then there's the kind of thing that everybody does. It's kind of which is why, ironically, one of the trade union weapons is to work to rule, because if you work to rule, it actually slows everything down, and the company knows that. They don't actually want you to work to rule. So we know.
I worked for BT, and we had 6 weeks training, intensive training, and then when we got out on the road, and it was all about safety, all about this anti-sue culture, and when we got out on the road, they said, "Oh no,
now what do we really do now?"
No, we don't bother doing that before we go into manhole and testing for gases and stuff like that. No, just go straight in there, So
that's right.
And I used to stand up for that. I used to go against it, and I ended up getting ousted from BT because I stood up to it. So, yeah.
If you work to rule, it's a bad thing. So that's right. So appropriate penalties for all farms, and so there's a real danger here that you're moving it towards. We've found some cruelty. And we found some abusers. Okay, what they've found is rights violations, which are everywhere. That's what they found. But we, the undersigned, are calling for improved monitoring and enforcement of existing animal welfare laws. Is that what you want? You want inspectors to go round? It's like putting CCTV cameras in slaughterhouses, as the Animal Justice Project shows. Doesn't work. Well, of course it doesn't work. These systems of use are systematically rights violations all the way through.
And we know Red
having
Tractor
having a camera on it makes no difference.
Yeah, exactly. We know Red Tractor is self-regulated by the farmers themselves, because even on the BBC
well,
show,
they invented the idea, didn't they?
yeah, so they actually said we brought Red Tractor in, and they did an unannounced visit to this dairy farm and found no violations. You know what I mean? It's like, well, of course they won't, because it's run by farmers for the farmers. And
you go to a circus in Britain, and you'll probably see a sign saying our circus is inspected by the RSPCA. The RSPCA is a traditional welfare thing. It's not an abolitionist. We're not talking the same language here. Yeah. If you bog yourself down in welfare like this petition has, it's going to be completely confused in terms of what we want. Because what the public want is for them to still be able to eat their dairy and eat their beef or whatever, but they want to do it in a non-cruel way. And what the ideology of animal welfare says is that you can have non-cruel use. Most use is non-cruel. I'll give you an example of this, right? Is that if people go into a supermarket in Britain and they pick a bit of flesh down from the shelf, they know that there's no cruelty in that piece of flesh. And the reason they know it is because the RSPCA exists, and they exist to prevent cruelty to animals. So if there was any cruelty in this piece of meat, the RSPCA would have made sure it's not there. But from an animal rights point of view, all that is irrelevant. And this is where this campaign doesn't make that clear. It's all irrelevant. You know, whether you fire these particular guys who are kicking the shit out of the cows and replace them with other people who are not going to kick the shit out of the cows, it still remains a place of animal rights violations. That's the fundamental issue. You can't control rights violations. It's kind of like trying to regulate atrocities. It can't be done. It's kind of like, you know, we've got to kill them better. We've got to move them around better. See, they've actually got a very difficult job. I mean, they're talking about really large other animals, cows. Fully grown cows are really big, and they've got to move them around. They've got to, you know, and all that. Eventually you've got to get them onto a lorry. Then you've got to get them off a lorry. Then you've got to get them into a slaughterhouse.
By people who are being low paid. So they've got no investment in the company or in the future of the company. So they
piecework as well. Piecework.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, somebody in Dublin was telling somebody only the day that they worked in a slaughterhouse, and they had to move them through quick, because the quicker you do it, the more money you get. And, I mean,
Alex, that's what piecework is, folks. For anybody who doesn't know what piecework is, rather than be paid a day rate, the more work you do, the more things you produce, the more money you get. So the quicker you work, the more money you get. You know, so
paid by the unit, paid by the piece. So piecework.
Piecework. Yeah. Right. Well, listen. Thank you very much for coming on at such short notice and having a chat with me about this, because I think it's crucial that we sort of comment on this video, because it did get out there. It would have seen a lot of people viewing this. So what would you say to people who want to...
What would concern me, though, Danny, is what vegans are going to say about it now. What they're going to say is that this is terribly cruel, and the cruelty shouldn't stop. And I think to be honest, what modern day vegans do now is they make a lot of cruelty claims, and then they put a vegan label on it. And, you know, you're saying that people make the connection. There's no direct connection there. What the culture says about cruelty is there shouldn't be the cruelty. The use bit is not that relevant. But that's the vegan point. So you've got to kind of make the connection between the two things. If people do that, and there is some evidence that people do, it's almost like despite what we say to them, because we say, don't be cruel with a vegan label on top, and then people are left to try and make the connection. The connection is the fact that actually we're talking about rights violations. And that is abolitionist. Just by default, because you don't get involved, you don't get bogged down in your arguments about cruelty. Oh, well, is that cruel? Is that not cruel? And all that irrelevant.
I mean, I've always sort of half and half with this, Roger. I mean, I know you're totally right, and on paper you're dead right, but in reality, sometimes it's something's going right. It is increasing, and more people are becoming
Oh yeah,
vegan.
don't get me wrong, Danny. I'm not saying that any words are banned. I'm not saying that we can't talk about cruelty, especially when other people bring it up.
No, I get that. I get that totally.
Yeah,
totally.
It's just that we've then got to say, however, our fundamental position is this. Get them to understand that, and so when they go home, they're not just thinking about cruelty. They're thinking about, oh, actually, they're saying that the real problem is the fact that the other animals have got rights, and that we're violating them by using them and buying this stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the seed you're putting in, not just
exactly.
that cruelty is bad.
Yeah.
They already know that cruelty is bad. Everybody knows that cruelty is bad.
Of course. But I mean, a lot of people are unaware that the cruelty goes on behind the scenes of what they buy. I mean, I've always looked at it. This is how I visualize it: is that we need to get people on the road going down this road, and however we get them on the tarmac first, we can use health, we can use environmental, whatever. We get them on that road, and then as they're going down, it's like one of them roller coasters where you've got things going on at either side. It's like then we hit them with the animal rights, then we hit them, and eventually we get to that point where we say, look, this is abolitionist. We need to stop this dead in the tracks. But I always feel that we've got to get people on the tarmac first or on the ride before we can sort of hit them with the other stuff. And the best way,
it's kind of giving them the reasons. I mean, I love the way you talk about roads all the time, Danny, as a truck driver. But,
I know, well, there you go. I've spent 30 years on them. What am I supposed to talk about? I can only talk about what I've experienced. So
yeah, but what I'm saying is, in any given animal use facility, there may or may not be levels of cruelty. There are always animal rights violations.
Yes,
every single one.
I get that.
And if that becomes part of the seed that we're planting, I think that gets them to veganism in a more solid kind of way. And we do have a problem, and we don't know this as part of our movement, is that a lot of people stop being vegan after a few years. So there's always this revolving door, the kind of Tom Reagan problem. We are good at recruiting, we're not particularly good at retaining. So that is a movement issue and a movement problem. So maybe one of the reasons why we don't retain is because people go, oh, well, I found a non-cruel version, so I'm okay. I found
the ethical dairy farmer. His shit's really good and it's not cruel. Yeah. Totally agree, mate.
Which is why, let's face it, you go to any forum and people are asking about, well, can we ride horses? What about backyard? They're looking for the non-cruel version.
Yes.
All the time. And we're in that conversation about cruelty, and we don't say, but actually, that's not the issue for us.
Correct. Listen, thank you so much, Roger. It's been really informative. I hope everybody out there has took something from this as well. And we shall speak again soon, Roger. Thank you.
Yeah. Goodbye, Earthlings. Take care.